How difficult must it be for Kurt Busch to accept that he'll never race again? And do you think he and Dale Earnhardt Jr. have convinced other drivers, regardless of the racing series, to take brain injuries more seriously?
Yes, absolutely, they have. I'll talk about Kurt here for a minute, but I do want to touch on Dale as well. But I imagine it's got to be so tough for Kurt. I mean, you saw it in the emotions of the announcement he made last year in Las Vegas. You saw him in the announcement he made this weekend at Daytona. I know he has worked so hard to come back from a crash that honestly did not look that serious, and I think kind of highlighted the concerns that all of us have had with this next-gen car since it debuted last year. And for Kurt to, be forced to step away for good at this point, the fact that it's been over a year since the crash and he still doesn't feel like he's at 100%, his doctors say there are too many hurdles for him to get back to 100%, has got to be such a tough pill to swallow. But at the same time, I have to commend Kurt, because I think if this had happened, say, 20 years ago, I think somebody in Kurt Busch's shoes might have decided, you know what, maybe 90% is good enough. Maybe I can tough it out and go back out there and see what I can do. And I might not be fully back 100%, but I'm good enough to go back out there and race. And then if there's another accident in a similar fashion, then, we don't even want to think about the kinds of outcomes that could happen if that ends up being the case. So for Kurt to be mature enough at this point in his career to step back and say, you know what, I'm a Cup Series champion. I've won the Daytona 500. I've accomplished so much in my career. It's okay. I can be at peace with stepping back and getting out of the race car and focusing 100% on my health. I think that's very, very great to see. And in talking about Dale Earnhardt Jr. as well, this isn't like a paid endorsement or anything, but I just want to highlight the book that Dale wrote a few years ago, Racing to the Finish. It is a must read. It should be required reading for any athlete, and honestly, any person that's ever had to deal with lingering concussion symptoms or dealt with a concussion in their careers. Dale was so open and honest about what it took to get back on the racetrack, how it's different from 20 years ago when the mindset was kind of just go in a dark room, put a washcloth on it, sleep it off, and you'll be back ready to go the next week. And Dale had a couple concussions early in his career where he didn't miss time. He didn't have to take time off. And then when he got into his late 30s, early 40s, had the incident in 2012 that caused him to miss a couple races. And then obviously the series of concussions in 2016 that forced him to sacrifice a year, really half a year of his career. And honestly, I think Dale probably wanted to keep racing a little bit longer than he did, at least full time. I know he comes back and does his 1 or 2 Xfinity races every year. But for Dale to be so open and honest about his journey and what it takes to recover from these injuries and why it's so important to take these injuries so seriously, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. And Kurt Busch being the same way. He has, Adam Lemery said, completely agree. I've read Dale Jr.'s book, fully enjoyed it. 10 out of 10, absolutely. Highly recommended to everybody watching here. Everybody who hasn't read it yet, go pick it up. It's a must read. But again, just drawing it back to Kurt, it's certainly an emotional week for him. I think we all kind of knew at this point that it was unlikely that we'd see him at least full time again in a race car. But at the same time, I think you have to commend him and give him a lot of credit for being mature enough to make this decision and recognizing that all good things must come to an end. It's just a little unfortunate that it's come to an end a little bit sooner than Kurt expected. And our own Joe Samaniego saying, hearing Kurt's situation reminded me of Neil Bonnet's situation in the 90s. And I think that's a good point as well. We've certainly come a long way in terms of safety, not just in terms of how safe the cars are, but also when injuries do happen, and concussions in particular happen, how we treat them and how we go about the recovery process to get back into the race car. I think we've come a long way, but there's still a long way we can continue to come.